We now take the conversation forward, and we'll begin with a journalist whose work reminds us that truth has a cost and that courage then often carries consequences. From Zimbabwe, Hopewell Chinono will be joining us. He's an award-winning investigative journalist and filmmaker. His work exposing corruption has not only informed the public, but has also placed him at the center of arrests, intimidation, and digital targeting. His voice represents the lived reality of practicing journalism under pressure in today's world. We'll also be joined by a guardian of newsroom integrity and press freedom here at home, representing the South African National Editors Forum, Malebo Page, who will be with us as well. Sanef, you'd know, has consistently stood at the forefront of defending journalists, raising critical concerns around surveillance, cyber harassment, and safety of media practitioners in South Africa. From the front lines of humanitarian work, where access to information can mean the difference between life and death, we welcome Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman of the Gift of the Givers. We are also joined by a voice dedicated to strengthening ethical media and holding power accountable in the digital age. And from Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird brings critical insight into misinformation, media accountability, and the urgent need for safer digital spaces. Adding a global human rights perspective, we will be with Genevieve Quintal from Amnesty International South Africa. Her work in defending journalists and advocating around surveillance, privacy, and digital rights highlights the moral and legal agency of protecting those who speak truth to power. And finally, grounding this discussion in legal clarity and constitutional protection, we are joined by Kayan Leung, who's the Deputy Director for Lawyers for Human Rights. And to all our guests, and it's a packed lineup of guests, we say thank you for being a part of this conversation. But let's begin with Hopewell Chinono. And Hopewell, thank you, because we appreciate the work that you've been doing, and we know the dangers that you've had to navigate through as a journalist. But from your experience, how has the nature of threats against journalists evolved from physical to digital?
Thank you very much for having me. I think it depends from country to country. I come from Zimbabwe, where we only have one television station. We were one of the two countries that had television for the first time in Africa alongside Nigeria, but we are a country which only has one television station, and we've become a laughing stock because of that across the continent. And because of that, our only television station is used as a propaganda machine by the ruling party. And this has been ongoing since post-colonial independence in 1980. 46 years down the line, nothing has changed. What has changed is that even when we try to use social media to communicate as journalists, as the media, we are also targeted. I've been imprisoned 3 times inside 6 months for exposing corruption, which involved high-level government officials. And the law is used as a weapon against truth-telling. And the tragedy in my country, in Zimbabwe, is that the judiciary is captured, the state institutions like the police are captured. So in my case, each time I exposed corruption, and in all the cases it involved the president or members of his family, I was arrested, taken to court, and detained illegally, which was later proved by the High Court when I was eventually freed. But what it means is that young journalists who look up to people like myself as the senior journalist, they become afraid to report and to hold government to account for its omissions and commissions.
Let me go to Mr. Malebo Page from the South African National Editors Forum. Malebo, from Sanef's point of view, as a country in South Africa, are media freedom rights being adhered to? What are some of the challenges that you've had to deal with? Sorry, Malebo, I think if you can unmute yourself there, because we are battling to hear you. We can't hear you. I hope you can. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, go ahead. We can hear you.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful.
I was saying the struggle, against journalists are the same as other journalists are experiencing outside, except that we have a different type of struggle against the journalists who are being attacked. I'm going to be focusing more on the algorithms. I'm going to be focusing more on the AI attacks against journalism, because the struggle has now moved from physical harm, against the journalists, to now online. It's somehow digital. We're talking about the algorithm attacks also in the media space. So that is going to be the focus, and we just wish that the AI policy, which was just withdrawn by the government recently, becomes a realistic achievement or something that can be worked towards. And I think everybody's aware by now that the government has just withdrawn its AI policy because it was flawed. So it's just one of the things that we're facing in South Africa. But not only that, we just hope that amongst others, the qualifications which are outdated in the industry are also going to be brought up to speed, because we're facing a situation where the curricula is quite outdated, and all those things do affect the freedom of the press in South Africa.
Let's go now to Genevieve Quintal from Amnesty International South Africa. Your organization has been focusing on this issue, giving us data from a global point of view, and from where things are going. I would like to get a sense as to whether you are seeing improvements, or it depends on the geopolitical dynamics at a particular time. And also now the issue of AI is becoming another big challenge.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. Definitely think that the situation globally is getting worse for journalists, not only those in conflict zones, not only in those in countries that are really cracking down on journalism, but in countries that were before probably seen as, democratic countries. Look at the US. We're seeing attacks on journalists, and my colleague from Sanef pointed out, the issue with digital attacks, with online attacks, have really increased. And it's really important that there's that link, that digital rights and press freedom are fundamentally interconnected. We cannot separate the two. And it's becoming extreme. It's becoming way too easy for people to attack journalists that way. The kind of abuse, verbal abuse journalists are getting online is shocking. We see issues of threats of surveillance, privacy issues. If you're having how are journalists supposed to do their work properly, if their digital footprint is being constantly followed? We have a problem with accountability, and I'm sure others in this chat will talk about the same thing. But we see these attacks on journalists, and yet there's no accountability for this attack on press freedom globally. And that's one of the big things that Amnesty International talks about: accountability. Because if we take our eye off the ball, if we don't hold people accountable, not only for the physical attacks, but the digital attacks as well. We're talking about big tech, we're talking about social media companies, etc. One day we're going to wake up and press freedom is going to be at its lowest. So we have to continue asking for accountability. We have to continue protecting press freedom globally.
Let me go to William Baird from Media Monitoring Africa. What is your reflection on this matter, the pros and cons, the positives and the negatives from the work that you've been doing over the years?
Sure. It's hard to be positive in such a bleak international environment where you've got politicians that normalize lying, corruption, deceit, and misogyny. But against that, if you look at South Africa, we've risen, I think, for the third time in a row in the World Press Freedom Rankings. We're there with Namibia. We're a couple of places up above them now. So certainly the picture is bleak in many places, but I think that there are also enough examples of organizations and entities and journalists that are saying despite these odds, which are on many levels apparently overwhelming, we're going to continue fighting, because what people are fighting for is our right to have access to information. It's our right to have freedom of expression. Unfortunately, we've just seen the Zambian government folding to international pressure, it would appear, from the Chinese government to stop RightsCon from going ahead. This was one of the biggest rights conferences that takes place annually. It was set to be in Zambia just this coming week, and that's been withheld. So, you know, it seems on some level we take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. But the short answer is we've got a fantastically strong constitution in South Africa, strong media, strong civil society, and we're going to keep on fighting. Whether we can influence others in the region to continue is a different story. But again, you see that even those in the most difficult scenarios, whether they're in Gaza or in Sudan, or like our colleague, Mr. Chinono, who's a veteran of these, you keep doing it because you know that you've got a mission to fulfill, and you'll do it no matter the cost.
Let's go to Kayan Leung from Lawyers for Human Rights. I mean, often journalists are up against very powerful individuals, business people, political heavyweights. To what extent do they get any sort of helping hand from the legal fraternity?
Good afternoon. That's such a great question. So first of all, I'd like to maybe enhance that there are constitutional protections that exist for journalists facing digital intimidation. And I think with the evolving developments of technology, you have different components. I think civil society, for one of them, and Lawyers for Human Rights is definitely open and available to offer protection, because we do see the synergies between freedom of information and the right to information for the public, and linking the role of journalists to ensure that this knowledge, the truth, is out there, and people are able to link that to how democracy and the rule of law and constitutionalism and human rights fundamentals is upheld. So I would say that there are a number of organizations, public interest law organizations, that do offer pro bono support, and I think there are existing partnerships within some of the guests and the organizations that they represent in trying to collaborate and ensuring and holding the different components and pillars of freedom of this information and the role of journalists in that regard. So one component, I think, certainly is around litigation and supporting that where applicable. Mr. William Bird has already expressed that the Constitution is very strong and explicit in relation to protection. Section 16 guarantees freedom of expression and of the press. And while Section 14 protects a right to privacy, our constitutional courts have repeatedly affirmed that a free and independent media is indispensable to our democracy. But I think one of the core fundamental issues is around implementation. So where we have constitutional rights, where the legislation has these frameworks, you have people manipulating and twisting this with regards to interception or surveillance and digital monitoring. And we need to ensure that the laws are implemented practically and developed alongside these new AI developments to ensure that the whole framework works in tandem. One, I think, really important development is around the amendments to the RICA. And so that's the Regulation of Interception of Communications Act. And of course, there was the 2021 Amobungani constitutional case that recognized we need to have the importance of journalists and sources to self-censor out of fear rather than out of law. So that you cannot have laws built to enable secrecy and surveillance without notification, and the lack of independent oversight and bulk interception, which is all unlawful. And we need to have laws that work alongside the interests of society and journalists as well.
And let me go to Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman from The Gift of the Givers. Obviously, you find yourself in the crossroads, even though your intentions are to just lend a helping hand. But to what extent does reliable information impact humanitarian efforts that organizations like yourselves are existing for?
Thank you very much. Before I answer your question, I want to honor and remember all those journalists who stood up for the truth, stood up against power, who lost their lives in the line of duty. Condolences to the families of those journalists and to all those journalists who are alive and still fighting truth to power, who stand up with the fear of losing their lives, losing their jobs, being harassed, intimidated. And those journalists and those editors and those media rooms that follow a foreign agenda to promote a certain type of narrative that's totally incorrect, illegal, harmful, and even shame on you. So thank you very much for the panel, and thank you very much for your question. The journalist media serves two purposes for us. Number one, it highlights the crisis in different situations, and then it creates an awareness among populations and corporates and donors across the world, and in our case, South Africa, to say this is a crisis, this is what needs assistance. For us, there's a special need or special meaning. If you're going to intervene with teams in a certain area, information coming back is critical to the safety of our teams. Which area do we move in? How do we move in? What precautions do we take? What is the exit strategy? We have a slightly different approach. You know, it's besides humanitarian aid itself, South African media teams join us. They come for two purposes. One, they show transparency, that we are totally humanitarian. We don't have an agenda. We serve people unconditionally. It doesn't matter in a situation of conflict. We know which side of the border you are. If you are in need, we help you. In man-made disasters like earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, of course, they see our work there too. And at the same time, they carry the story home. It creates awareness about human suffering. It creates awareness about human resilience. It also tells the donors their money is being well spent. It motivates populations, communities to support you more, and also to reflect on your own situation in your own home country. So the purposes are multiple. We've lost a lot of journalist friends in Gaza. They've been deliberately targeted, as has been my office. I've lost the head of my office, and my teams have lost 205 members murdered by Israel.
Very sad indeed. Let me go back to Hopewell. Hopewell, what then needs to happen for journalists like you to enjoy media freedom, despite the fact that you have organizations like Sanef, Lawyers for Human Rights, Amnesty International, and all of them looking, displaying interest in terms of some of the challenges that journalists like you go through. But it looks like we take two steps forward and 3 steps back, depending on where the volatile situation is taking place in the world. Is there a solution moving forward, or do you guys have to just take it on the chin and move on?
I think there's always a solution, and the solution is the Constitution. The laws that are in the constitutions of Zimbabwe and many other African countries uphold media freedom and free speech. But unfortunately, governments refuse to adhere to those laws. So for instance, in our case in Zimbabwe, as I said, I've been to prison, but that's not the worst that has happened to journalists. Journalists have disappeared. Itai Dzamara is one such journalist who is now presumed dead because he disappeared around 2015, 2016. And nothing was done by the government of Zimbabwe. Nothing was done by SADC. SADC has got protocols that protect journalists within member countries. But unfortunately, member countries such as South Africa, which has a good track record in terms of media freedoms, they do nothing about it because they work in cahoots as governments to protect each other. So you find that if journalists are incarcerated or killed in Zimbabwe or any other country in the SADC region, the SADC board itself does nothing to make sure that the country that is become a culprit and a stain to the community of countries within Southern Africa is asked to account for its actions. You find that within the body politic of SADC, they fail to even apply the rules and regulations which are meant to protect the press, the media at large and journalists as individuals. So you find that people like myself, we end up running away from our countries. In my case, I was warned by a senior South African government official to leave Zimbabwe because they felt that there was an imminent attempt to harm me. But the question is, why wouldn't the same government then deal with the issue on a government-to-government basis with their sister country? Again, it's a case of them protecting each other and not doing much about it. And I think the world is becoming more repressive in terms of the media, because even countries like the United States of America, which used to speak about free speech and free media, is now being led by a man who has no respect for the media itself. Anything that reports or holds him to account is called fake news. As our colleague on the panel said, over 250 journalists were killed in Gaza. And yet the big countries that are supposed to be speaking out against these atrocities are doing nothing about it. In 2025, over 67 journalists were incarcerated in prisons across the continent. And countries that should be speaking out against this kind of persecution, like South Africa, on a government level, they are doing nothing about it. The African Union does nothing about it. So you find that journalists, we are now on our own.
Yeah.
And because of that, you find that a lot of journalists are afraid to report stories that are happening in their country.
Yeah,
A good
yeah.
example is, for instance,
I wish we had more time. We've run out of time. And thank you so much to the panelists that came through to join us on SABC News. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah, as I said, I wish we had not more time, but we have to hand over to Nicole Kente.